Comrades, today we are talking about the 2025 four-star classic, Together, a body horror movie that says if you love someone else enough, you should become a different person. And it begins like a relatively normal horror movie, something bad happens to these dogs, there's this dysfunctional couple, Millie and Tim, that recently moved into the middle of nowhere and are currently pretending like rural America isn't creepy. And oh yeah, recently a different couple moved in and went missing in the same town, but I'm sure that will have no bearing on the rest of the events in this movie. This man, Jamie, who is completely normal by the way, don't ask any questions, nothing weird about him.
This is so predictably small town to say this, but I think we're neighbors.
He suggests that they go hiking, so the couple goes out, gets lost, falls into a cave that used to be a pagan church, and they become much more attracted to each other, like literally sticking together. They start fusing together. They resist, at one point cutting through their arms, which had already started to fuse together, but they realize they are destined to become one person. Part 1. Is love bad? To understand this movie, we need to understand why they were not happy to begin with. They've been together for about 10 years, but Millie is much more committed to the relationship, proposing marriage at a party. But Tim is hesitant to accept. Millie is also, quite frankly, the much more functional of the two. She has a job as a teacher and she can live independently. Tim is still chasing his dream of becoming a rock star, even though he can't get a record deal, doesn't seem to have any job, and can't drive. So he is completely reliant on Millie for pretty much everything. Tim is afraid he's given himself up. He's given up his dreams. He's given up living in the city with his friends, with the cool parties and the music scene. And he's done all this just to stick to Millie's life. At the beginning of the movie, when Tim is trying to figure out, if he can go on tour with a band while staying with Millie, someone says to him,
That's cool. It's just when I die, I don't want someone else's life flashing before my eyes.
this is Tim's anxiety. He feels like a loser. He expresses being trapped, having to work his entire life around someone else's schedule. And within the limits of his relationship, he doesn't seem to have it together to gain any level of independence. And we see Millie's much smaller version of this with cooking. At one point, Millie praises Tim's cooking and admits that she doesn't know how to cook. She jokes that it's Tim's fault because he's such a good cook. She never had to learn. Clearly, if they'd been single all this time, they would have had to grow more as people. Millie would have learned how to cook, Tim would have had to learn how to drive, and to find some kind of stable job. And personally watching it, it's hard not to feel like Millie could do better than Tim. He seems uncommitted to the relationship and is far more dependent on Millie. It's also unclear whether Tim is a good boyfriend more generally. When asked to name something good that Tim actually did for Millie, she can only mention that he gave her her favorite album on a vinyl record on their second date, which was nearly a decade ago. There's also a moment when they fall into the cave.
Are you okay?
My phone. Shit. Can you call it?
I don't have signal.
Fuck. My demos were on there.
I'm fine, by the way.
He doesn't show any concern for her well-being, even though she just fell into a cave. But I think Millie's anxiety is different. She's not worried that she could have a better partner, but rather that Tim is trapped and unhappy, that he could be free in the city, doing whatever he wants, but he's at home, a rural home with her, caged.
You mad at me?
No. I just mean, stay out. Enjoy the after party, sleep at Luke's and actually catch up with everyone. No use coming back here and feeling trapped.
And I do find myself really kind of wondering, like, why does she love him? And I think it might be connected to another fear that Tim has, and that's need. We can see Tim's nightmares in this movie, and we can see what he's afraid of, and we can see that in his nightmares, Millie says,
Everyone knows you need me more than I need you.
and honestly, this is true, and I find need to be an interesting framework for understanding love. Here, the fact that Millie doesn't need Tim is evidence that he is an undesirable partner. Romantic partners share duties and cost of living, paying rent, cooking, cleaning, etc. To have a child, you need a partner. Ideally, both partners should kind of need each other equally. But love itself is a need, and Millie loves Tim, and I think there's a certain love that can come not from needing someone, but from being needed. You know, a child needs their parent more than a parent needs their child, but the parent loves their child more than the child loves their parent. The parent would give themselves up for their child. And some people might say that a parent only loves their child so far as they're an extension of themselves, and it's not because they are needed by the child that a parent loves them. But this isn't the only case where someone loves another because the other is completely dependent on them. You know, there are of course pets, for example. You know, people love their dogs, cats, bunnies, and what have you. You know, they feel that love very deeply despite the fact that it's a one-sided relationship in terms of providing. You know, a house cat might make a token effort at offering a dead bird at your doorstep, but it's clear that a human provides for their pet more than a pet provides for their human. So is that why Millie loves Tim? Is he more like a needy pet that doesn't give back than a functional romantic partner? And I don't think this would be the only example. You know, I think a lot of people might know a couple like this, you know, like The Simpsons.
Wait a minute. Wait, that's it! I know now what I can offer you that no one else can! Complete and utter dependence!
Homer, that's not a good thing.
Are you kidding? It's a wondrous, marvelous thing!
A couple can fall into codependence because one person in the couple absolutely needs the other, and the other needs to be needed. In the end, it is need that determines the fate of Millie and Tim. Tim is ready to kill himself so, you know, Millie can live without him so that they don't have to worry about this attraction that will fuse them together. And bluntly speaking, it's the decision that makes sense. You know, he talks about how he remembers life before their relationship, how he was miserable. He knows that he will be miserable and have nothing to live for without Millie. Whereas Millie could survive the breakup. She would have a fulfilling job as a teacher. She could find a stable partner and she could live out a good life. But Tim would have nothing but the broken dreams of becoming a rock star. And he loves Millie and he wants what's best for her. And in that moment, he doesn't think that he is what's best for her. And he thinks she can live separately, happier than together as one person with him. But before he kills himself, he sees that she's already fatally wounded. Her wrist is cut open. She tells him to go, to be free, but freedom in the sense of not being connected or caring about another person is not what Tim desires.
You gotta run. You gotta be free.
I'll never be free from you.
So he grabs her arm where she's bleeding and he fuses his hand to her wound to stop the bleeding. He becomes one with her so that they both may live. By proving his willingness to sacrifice himself for her, Tim seems to achieve a kind of narrative redemption where he might have not been the perfect boyfriend, but he displays the ultimate selfless love. And watching this for me, it felt weird, you know. In general, for me, it feels weird when we're supposed to kind of forgive a character's shortcomings because of one grand act, one major gesture at the end of the movie. But in this particular case, one with such grave consequences for the other person, you know, it felt even weirder. But, you know, she was dying, so there really was no other choice for him. And I found this to be a really interesting ending to a horror movie, you know? Like, we spend the entire movie watching two people run from something that is depicted as monstrous and terrifying, you know, as near death, like giving yourself up to become, you know, one with another person. But in the end, they embrace it quite literally. They hug each other. In most horror movies, there is some monster, some curse that either destroys our heroes or is vanquished by them. But, like, in this movie, we're confronted with the idea that the curse might actually be good, and we must ask ourselves whether they made the right decision, you know, to fuse together, to become a whole other person. We must ask ourselves if we would do the same thing in their position. Part 2. Is love good? Jamie, who's really two people, combined into one, is the former member of the pagan church, and, you know, he's the person who pushes Millie and Tim together, and he's in favor of the whole process.
It's a good deal, you know? She gets a personal cook and I'm trapped here.
Trapped?
I can't even make it to the train station unless it fits your schedule.
Nobody's holding you hostage, Tim.
But no, hostages don't have to cook their own food.
Well, it sounds to me like you complete each other.
And he shares with us the story Aristophanes gave in Plato's Symposium about how, you know, in ancient times, people had 4 legs and 4 arms and 2 heads, and they cartwheeled about, until they threatened the gods because they were too powerful, and the gods split them into two to lessen their power. And this is the reason people go about feeling incomplete, searching for the other half. And he says that we should be careful not to upset the gods too much, or they would repeat the process, and we would all have to go about hopping on one leg with one arm to hold things and one eye to see things. And I think it's an interesting idea of love. The original version, Aristophanes' version, is obviously like a joke. He's a very famous comedian, but a lot of people have really like looked into it and tried to take it very seriously. I think you have to kind of imagine if you could take your partner and join with them, have no secrets, no betrayal, just two people sharing their strengths together, becoming more powerful. I think that's a really interesting idea. And I often think about how so much of what humans need are really just needs for proximity. People talk about being touch starved or needing a hug or wanting to cuddle and listen to someone's heartbeat. And, whether for warmth or just to feel that someone else is there. And one of the things I find really interesting about this is, we're a collection of atoms. And the atoms of one object never really touch the atoms of another object. Like, they can come close, but my hands can't actually touch each other. There'll always be like a little bit of space between my two hands here, or between my hand and the book here and The Handmaid's Tale. But one of the things I always think about is like when you kiss, you exchange saliva, which means part of another person goes into you and becomes part of you. And likewise, a part of you becomes part of another person. So in a way, like, kissing is really the truest way of touching your romantic partner. Like, unless you want to do like a blood chin fusion with them, that is. But this kind of fusing together, it would be the ultimate hug, the ultimate embrace. You wouldn't just hear your partner's heartbeat while your head rests on their chest. You would share the same heart. And I can see how someone would see a kind of beauty in that. I think this also might be why, like, some people talk about, like, vor a lot. Like, they experience the desire of wanting to be, like, eaten whole and to continue, like, living inside another person. But to fully understand this movie and its conception of love, I think we have to talk about four corpses. So when they first move in, Tim smells something awful, but Millie doesn't notice it. But Tim, he does notice it, and he knows to look above a light fixture in the house. And that's where he finds it. He finds a rat king. And if you don't know what a rat king is, I'm sorry to be the one to inform you. But it's when a bunch of rats get tangled up together. Like, maybe they're stuck because of some kind of sticky material, or maybe all of their tails get tied together. But any way it happens, a bunch of rats can get stuck together and they die. They can't move. One of them starves to death, and they like scratch each other, they get wounded, they bleed out, and their rotting corpses slowly kill the other rats in the Rat King that none of them can escape from. And for Tim, this unlocks a memory he had as a child, where his father could smell something awful in Tim's room, but Tim didn't smell anything, and he couldn't find anything. So his father went and looked and found a dead rat that had been above the light in his room, because there was a warm place to be, but, the rat died there. And Tim talks about how every time he used it, like, he cooked it, like, just a little bit more, each time, and he was never able to smell it. He talks about how he was breathing in the smell of a rotting corpse as if it were fresh air because he was so accustomed to it. It reminds me of, like, that myth of the frog being boiled in a pot so slowly it never notices. It dies there without ever trying to escape. But instead of, like, being, you, the one who dies, you're not the frog. Someone else is already dead, and you never notice it because the smell of their death to you comes so gradually, so slowly, you never notice. And that's when Tim talks about the second corpse that we need to understand. That rotting rat that he couldn't smell is how he found his own parents. His dad had died, and it broke his mom, and she couldn't do anything about it. Tim had gone home, not expecting anything, but when he opened the door to the house, he was overtaken by a stench so foul he could taste it, a stench that grew worse with every step he took. And surely, Tim must have panicked. Tim must have known that something was wrong, something was terrible to produce that stench. But what he found was almost too disturbing to imagine. His mom, unbothered, not noticing the foul stench emanating from the corpse right next to her, sat peacefully in bed next to the corpse of her husband. And in this moment, we know that this is what Tim fears. This is why he has panic attacks. He sees his mother in his own nightmares. He doesn't see his father. He doesn't see his father's corpse because it is normal to die. He sees his mother unwilling, incapable of accepting that the man next to her is dead, herself slowly dying because of it. When he has nightmares, when Millie says that everyone knows that he needs her more than she needs him, he sees his mother in bed. But I think it's Millie who really explains this theory. You know, when they're fighting about what Tim will do, how Tim needs her to drive home, and, you know, how he has to fit everything around her schedule. She says that she's starting to feel less like his girlfriend and more like his mother. And Tim asks what that means. And she doesn't say that he is immature, which is watching this the answer I was expecting. She doesn't say that he's like a child she must take care of. She says,
What's that supposed to mean?
Like I'm living with something that's dead.
and I think this is Tim's real fear. He can smell the corpse. He is the third corpse we need to understand. And he dreads that Millie is right, that she is like his mother. And of course, Tim isn't afraid that he is literally dead, but rather that he is spiritually dead. His dreams are broken. He cannot get a record deal, and he must know deep down in his heart of hearts that he will not be a successful musician. He will not be a rock star, and he has nothing to replace that dream with. And at this point, we need to talk about the final corpse. When Tim knows what's happening, that he's being pushed towards Millie to fuse together by the supernatural power, he goes back to the cave to look for answers, and what he finds is the couple that had gone missing before. But they were not fused together as one. They resisted the process, and what is left is a monster, a person walking around partially fused to a corpse with a knife in the throat of the corpse. They would rather kill each other than join together because they fought, and one of the two people who supposedly loved each other killed the other. But to be tied, joined to a dead thing, like the couple, like Tim's mom, like the Rat King, is just another way to die. It reminds me of something from Book 8 of the Aeneid, lines 483 through 9, which talks about a king who tied living people to dead people in order to let the rot from the dead people slowly kill the living people as kind of like a torture punishment. And the fact is that Tim and Millie are tied together. They are in love, and they will not choose to leave each other. Maybe it doesn't matter what job each one has, or what skill they have, or what they do, or, you know, because really, love is rarely determined by such things. And because they are in love, the only two options are for both of them to die, or for both of them to live. And we, watching this movie, will not be able to physically be united and become one with our partners. But for so long as we are in love with another person, and that person is in love with us, we can act as one so that our interests are combined, so that we don't hide things from each other, and so that, you know, the other may live and thrive so that we may live and thrive too. Part 3. Is this about self-love? So, and I cannot stress this enough, they do literally become one person at the end, which is insane. Like, practically it makes no sense, and just leaves me with a bunch of logistical questions, like, how do they pay taxes? Does one of them get a death certificate? Do they both get death certificates? Like, do they somehow have to convince the government to give them a new social security number? Can this new person drive? Do they need a new license? Can they fall in love again? Like, couldn't this process just repeat again and again and again until all of humanity is a single person? Or is there some kind of law in the magic pagan water that doesn't accept polycules? And like, if not, what stops them from turning into the Borg? And were the Borg anti-poly propaganda in the first place? And like, what about gender? Like, the new person looks androgynous, but does that mean they feel non-binary? Millie was a teacher, right? Like, does that just continue? Does this new person still really love music, and like, do they want to pursue some kind of career as an artist? How would they explain it to like the kids, the students, to the school board? And like, the last scene is really interesting. You know, Millie's parents come over and they kind of overlook the mess in the front yard, you know, with all the blood of like when they cut their arms, like, you know, severing like Millie's injury and all of that. And so the parents, Millie's parents, ring the bell, and an androgynous person opens the door. You know, the two people combined into one. And imagine that moment. You are someone's parents, and a stranger, is telling you that they are a combination of your daughter and your son-in-law. And for the most part, to interpret this movie, I've interpreted pretty much all of the couple problems as real, and the fusion into a single person as a metaphor for a kind of a proposed solution to these problems, to the couple problem. But this ending scene begs for something else. It's practically pleading me to do the opposite. What if the union as a single person is the only kind of real part? What if all the couple problems are kind of a metaphor? What if it was always one person who struggled to accept their non binary identity, who struggled between maintaining their youthful desire to create music and their more adult desire to be a great teacher and be a positive influence in the lives of children? You know, someone who wasn't sure if they still wanted to party like they did when they were 22. Like, we all struggle with various parts of who we are. Some of us might struggle with parts of our identity, how we view ourselves. Some of us might struggle with growing older, slowly, no longer wanting to do the same things we used to do, or slowly wanting to do new things. Or some of us might struggle to tell our parents who we really are, and some of us might even feel like we are forced to live a lie, or to let part of ourselves die while it rots away at our core and leaves us feeling entirely dead. And maybe this movie isn't about romantic love at all, but really kind of self-love, something that can be incredibly complicated and difficult for many people. Like, you know, Jamie says to them that it seems like you complete each other. What if it's already a person who is complete but feels fractured and feels like they have to choose one part over the other when they need to kind of learn to accept both parts and let both parts grow together? If you are the kind of person who enjoyed this video, you might also be the kind of person who would enjoy exploring how Flushed Away is liberal propaganda. Yes, that Flushed Away. The cartoon about sewer rats in London. And yes, I do think it's liberal propaganda. What do I mean by that? You'll have to click over here to find out. Or you can watch one of my other videos where I talk about like a book or something. But don't forget to drop me a like before you go. And remember, good night, good day, and good potato.